Welcome to the Adaptive Collaborative Podcast, connecting the adaptive communities. Hosted by James Norris, founder of Handy Capable Fitness, and Melissa DeChellis, founder of Adaptively Abled Amputees and Adaptively Abled Fitness.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Adaptive Collaborative Podcast. I am so excited because we have quite a powerhouse with us here today. Ms. Sarah Tuberty. She is a doctor of occupational therapy. She's a flight attendant with American Airlines, an aerial artist, a model, a Maxim Cover Girl Challenge quarterfinalist, a model, an advocate, and co-host of the podcast Disarming Disability. Welcome, Sarah. So I gave a list of some of your accomplishments, but would you like to tell our guests a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited for your mission and all the things that you're doing with your podcast and all of the work that all of you are doing in your lives just to make disability a prominent highlight in the sort of human experience, I suppose. So my name is Sarah. I have a congenital limb difference, is the terminology that I use with my hand, or congenital amputee, which means that I was born with my hand that looks this way. There isn't any great reasoning as to why my fingers were sort of born underdeveloped. And of course caused lots of anxiety to my parents. I was the only person I knew growing up that had a hand difference, so that sort of incorporated all those challenges. So I thought I was alone for a very long time. And I just hear over and over again all of the struggles that parents have when raising their kids with limb differences, because everybody kind of feels alone. So that has led and give breath to so much of the work that I'm doing now, which is really just finding pride in our body differences and finding pride in our disability identity, and really coming together to help rewrite what it means to be part of the disability community, or what it means to be somebody that does have a difference, whether that was acquired or congenital, and have that really be a part of the human variation, so that these things are accepted just as height and eye color and hair color are, that these are things that exist. So that is led me to all of these different projects and things I've been involved in.
I absolutely love that. Now, you said growing up that you hadn't seen anybody with a limb difference until you were 19. Mm-hmm. So what was that like, growing up and never really seeing anybody with that before?
Yeah, growing up was fine initially, right? As a 3-year-old, we're not totally aware of really anything in the world. So I knew that my hand existed, but it was just like, okay, cool, I'm going to build a sandcastle. Do you want to build one with me? And that was fine. I made friends very easily. I'm incredibly outgoing, so make friends here and there. However, part of my story, I changed schools when I was in 3rd grade. And when we are 8 years old, every sort of 8-year-old, just in sort of the developmental component of understanding who we are, that's when we really are looking to the external environment to figure out how we sort of fit into the world. So that can be a crisis for kids that are born with congenital differences, or are born with differences, because then they're really looking to the outside world, which in the early 90s wasn't very kind to people who had differences. So that happening, me entering that crisis and understanding that my body part was different and that different wasn't necessarily favored, in conjunction with me changing schools and being a part of an entirely new peer group, was absolutely devastating for me. Like that was a huge crisis moment. There's this great picture that I drew when I was a kid that just is this like sad tree on top of this like sad hill. It's all like very deep and like dark coloring. It's very jagged, which just gives breath to that crisis that I was facing. So at that point, I became very insecure. I didn't have anybody else with any type of similar experience, whether it was a hand difference or any type of difference that, sort of was a non-typically, what we envision humans look like. So I felt very alone in that, and then just thought that I was less than of a human, right? So a lot of kids didn't want to be my friend. I had to ask kids if I could play with them on the playground, and they said no.
Oh no.
And they called me the girl at the Barbie hand, and which I don't totally get because Barbie has all her fingers, but I guess that it was small. I don't know. So that was very hard, and just feeling really alone and very ashamed by that. Up until I was 19. And 19, I sort of lived through that for, that was 11 years at that point.
So I remember very vividly that one moment in my life where I decided, you know what, this is who I am, take it or leave it. So what was that moment for you, Sarah?
There's a great moment that happened it was probably a year ago, a little over a year ago. I was on my clinical placement for my occupational therapy program, and I was living in Chicago, and I had gone out to a bar to get drinks with the fellow girlfriends that I had on my clinical rotation. It was a Friday night. And so there was this group of guys that come over, and they're sort of, talking to my friends and whatever. So this guy, he notices my hand, right? Because there's always this moment of discovery, and particularly with a difference that can almost pass as normal, right? If I kind of hide it underneath the table, or maybe I put it behind my back, then like people won't notice it head on, or that might not be the first thing they notice. So then there's like this moment of discovery. So he discovers my hand. And then of course there's a follow-up of like what happened, right? So then we have to go into that whole narrative of everything that happened. So he asked me, and I said, I don't know, because honestly, I don't know what happened to my hand. I was born with my hand that looks like this. And he just looked at me and he said, oh, so you're born deformed? And it was that moment where people have called me deformed my whole life, like that just as part of the narrative of the things that I grew up with. But it was then that I just got through all my disability pride studies. This is right when Nicole Kelly and I were beginning the Disarming Disability podcast. And I had enough. I just got so angry. I was like, I'm tired of people calling me deformed. I'm tired of crying in bathrooms about things that people have said to me. Like, I don't have the energy to cry about this anymore. And also knowing that this isn't me, like this isn't just my story, that this story is repeated so many times through so many other people that I had met that sort of have differences similar to mine, that I was just like, if I let this gentleman or whatever, this guy tell me that I'm deformed, then he's calling all of my friends deformed too. And I was like, this is enough. So it had been a moment where I had been fighting it for a long time, because that takes a lot of energy to come out and be like, no, I will not have you say these things about me anymore. But it just was like, that was the last straw that I needed, that really was my breaking point, to be like, I am tired of being ashamed about my body, because it is so exhausting to be ashamed of yourself. And it is so exhausting to hide yourself. And that like constant social anxiety of, when will someone find out? What are they going to say? How am I going to respond? So all of that happened. And instead of getting up and crying, because it felt like a little dagger just hit me, right? So instead of like crying, I just looked at him and I was like, okay, Mike, like, how about we try that again? Is deformed really a word that we want to use to describe people? Like, do you really want to be described as deformed? Like, probably not. Like, there's got to be other words we can use. And he was just like, oh, whoa, what? What would you say? I was like, I don't know, different? Like, tell me about your hand or something. So it was cute. He's like, oh, is there anything else weird about your arm? And I was like, no. Did we not learn the first time? And I was like, weird is not an inclusive, friendly word, which is cute. And then at the end of it, he asked for my phone number. And I was like, no. And he said, well, what do you mean? Why you won't give it to me? And I was like, no, this didn't go well for you. Like, I don't know if you realize this or not, but you called me deformed. So no, you don't get my phone number. And that was just a big fuel to be like, this isn't just about me. This is about everyone like me, and really my voice, and encouraging others to take on their voices, to really call that out and really help change the narrative on what we think of when we see people with different bodies. Is just like, that helped fuel the big fire and the stuff that I'm doing now.
So I'm going to go off script for a moment.
Yeah.
And I want you to continue on that thread. So what do you want the narrative to be now?
I want the narrative to be that disability is a part of human variation and always has been. as long as we have been here, there has been disability, and that's not a bad thing. And it's nothing to over celebrate or under celebrate. That disability has its own cultural identity, just as all of our other cultural identities have too, and that there's a lot of value and of beautiful things that I have learned through having my hand difference, and that disability is just, it's here. So I would love for people to not be surprised or be taken aback when they find people that have differences, because we exist and we're everywhere, but we're just not shown in any of the mainstream outlets, and our stories aren't shown in any of the mainstream outlets. So I just don't want disability to be seen as this incredibly like depressing life that's not worth living, right? And I just watched the Lady Gaga documentary, and Lady Gaga talks about her song Jolene and how that was her aunt who had passed when she was 19 as a result of complications with lupus, and that there was this decision that her mom had to make, or her grandmother, Lady Gaga's grandmothers, had to make, was if Jolene needed to have her arms amputated or her hands amputated as a result of lupus. And her grandmother was like, no, she's an artist. I can't take her hands away from her. And just that, like, I mean, I have no idea if the hand amputation would have saved Jolene or not, but just that idea that I can't see how someone could possibly live their lives if they have this difference. I really want to help challenge that, because I think that we're all worthy to be here. We're all worthy to take up space. We're all worthy to share our voices and our stories, and there's a value in our voices and in our stories, and that's nothing to be afraid of or ashamed of.
So as we alluded to in the open, you are doing so many amazing things and really helping out this community. So what do you say to people when they're like, oh my God, you're such an inspiration?
Yeah, it's I know that inspiration is kind of a tricky space, right? I know Stella Young did a beautiful TED Talk. If you haven't seen it already, it's great to look at. And she really coined the term inspiration porn, and that idea that just because somebody is different means that they're like need to be placed on this pedestal and everything about them is so miraculous, when they may not have actually done anything that is sort of worthy of that praise. But I think that I think anybody who can really tap into the truth of who they are and are willing to share the truth of who they are, that is inspiring. So yes, like if that's something that empowers people to want to share their story and to want to be a part of a Maxim cover challenge or any of these other types of things, then like, yes, absolutely. I'm so happy and so thankful that people are feeling empowered by this story, because that's all I wanted when I was 8. I just wanted somebody to give me permission to love myself and to be proud of myself. So I just am trying to give the world resources now that I wish I had when I was 8, so that I didn't have to go through 20 years of hating myself and just to like get over that quicker. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing. So yes, I hope people feel empowered and inspired to take on those aspects of themselves. Yeah.
I love that, Sarah. So not inspired to watch you go grocery shopping, but inspired by the beautiful words and the actions and things that you're doing to impact the community. So in a recent episode of your podcast, Disarming Disability, you were sharing a story about an interaction you had with a young child who had a very similar hand difference to you. Would you like to elaborate on that and let us know what that experience was like for you and also for her, but also for her parents?
Yes, this was one of those places where you're just like, the stars are aligning so beautifully. I ended up being connected to this family that I happened to be in the same town that they were living in. My parents had just moved to Northern Arizona, and that's where this family was living. And I ended up being connected to them. And it is Jenny Abbott and her daughter, Evie. Evie is about 6. And she's the youngest in her family. So I was able to meet up with them at a park. And it was just so it just reminded me again that this is why I'm doing so much of the work that I'm doing. It's just to look at this 6-year-old's face and to just see how excited she is that she saw in person somebody else with a hand that looked so similar to hers, just so that way she knows that there are people that exist that are like her and have met them and talked to them, and really just wishing that I had seen somebody like that when I was younger. And was just so, I mean, and she was such a, you know, she's 6, so she just wanted to kind of play and eat ice cream. And so it was just really fun to be a 6-year-old with her in that space. And also it was just really powerful to talk with her mother. Her mother had lots of questions, and just her mother sharing the experience of what it was like in the delivery room, and how people had sort of, you know, physicians and things had come in and were almost accusing her of doing something at some point in the pregnancy that then caused the hand difference. And her just being like, oh my gosh, like I'm just, she had no idea that her daughter was going to have this type of hand until birth. And then sort of being accused that she did something during her pregnancy was just like so not okay. And just like, just to be able to talk to her and to hear her story, and then just give her more validation that it's nothing that she did or didn't do, that sometimes these things just happen, was just so fun and so powerful for me too, because it just gives life to so much of the things that, like, yes, this is the space that I need to be in, and this is the time and the energy that I need to dedicate to making these types of connections happen, because it's real, because it's so real, and just being able to see ourselves is so important.
Being that you're a woman of many hats, you know, you work in the travel industry, you do aerial arts, modeling, occupational therapy. Do you find that your coworkers are treat you differently or react to you differently?
They do. I think fortunately, with the rise of all of the work that people have been doing in disability recently, or maybe I've just been more proud so I don't notice it as much, but I feel when I first started doing this work, absolutely, you know, there would be the questions every once in a while. When I first got my job as a flight attendant, my first flight that I worked on, I mean, I'm 23, I'm like a baby adult in the world. And the first flight that I'm working on, I'm sitting next to this guy in the jump seat that's like, how did you even get this job? And I was like, I went to training, like I passed everything that everybody else did. And this is also my first flight and I'm already scared anyway. And so those types of things exist. And, you know, I've been able to develop the armor and try to find language to help direct people to be more kind in it. But that stigma does still exist. And sometimes even passengers in the airline industry will, you know, be really surprised. You know, I sort of watch me doing the safety demo. And so they're kind of like half paying attention, and then they see me, and then they start following my hand and everything that I'm doing. And sometimes I'll wave it around slightly more dramatically than it needs to be woven or, you know, like flagged around, just to be like, hey, I see you looking at me and it's okay. So things like that. But you know what was actually really beautiful on my occupational therapy rotations, I found that when I was in the room, I was my rotations were in acute care. Both of them were for adults that had just come into the hospital for, you know, an operation, or they came in because of ER, regardless. When working with them, it was the first time that they really saw it as like a beacon of hope, is the words I'm going to say, because they knew that I understood part of their experience, and they just connected and related with me so much on, and I was able to connect and relate with them on it, that it really, like, that was such an added value to my ability to be able to provide, you know, therapeutic services. And people really trusted me a lot more, and really felt heard and listened, and then were so much more willing to share more of their stories with me. I think just because they saw my hand and felt that it was that same language. I had a gentleman who, he was in his 70s and he had gotten his hip replaced, and he saw my hand and we were talking about it. And then afterwards he gave me this big hug, you know, after our session. And he said that he was so embarrassed to tell his family that he needed a hip replacement. So he didn't tell his family, because they didn't want to think that he was like less of a man, or less, able to do, you know, less be able to be the father and grandfather figure. And then he's like, and then I see you and I see that those aren't real. And I mean, that just like broke my heart, right? And to thinking that he didn't even want to tell his family that he was going to go through an operation. Operations can be scary, but he didn't feel that he could reach out to his supports because he didn't want them to think less of him.
So circling back to your experience as an airline attendant, you must have traveled to some pretty cool places. To date, what has been the coolest place you've been able to travel to?
You know what? Taiwan has been my favorite place because I feel like no one talks about Taiwan. I feel that people talk about Thailand and people talk about Cambodia, but when we're thinking of different places in Asia, none of my friends had ever mentioned Taiwan. I had gone for a conference, and it was so beautiful. And Taipei is right, it's kind of on the water, and then it's right in between these like two mountain ranges, and I got to go tea leaf picking, and it was so incredible. So I've been to 27 countries total, and then I've been to 45 of the 50 states. So I'm getting there.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you, because I've seen videos of this on America's Got Talent and a bunch of different shows. What in God's name inspired you to do aerial art?
Yes, I was a really good friend of mine, Cassidy Causey. She found an aerial studio in Philadelphia. She's a flight attendant with me. And I thought about taking classes. And then when I went up to graduate school in Boston, I went to Boston University for my occupational therapy program. I knew that going into the classroom was going to be very hard because I like moving, that it was just like going from running an airplane and traveling all over the world to like sitting in a classroom and watching PowerPoints was going to be really hard. So I knew that taking yoga classes in my undergrad was pretty successful because I need to go to a class. I can't just go to a gym. That's not how my body, I'll make up every excuse not to go. But if there's a class and I have to be there at a certain time, I will. And Boston University has, their rec department had aerial classes. So I signed up and it was so hard. I was so tense during it that, my body would hurt it would be sore for days after my first couple of classes. And there was a girl she was in my class with me, and then she took another class, she took 2 classes per week. And in the beginning, she was sort of on our side with like the new people who are just starting. But then towards the end of the semester, she was on the side with all the advanced girls in my class. And I was like, okay, I'll take 2 classes. And then it was just so empowering because it was so hard. I couldn't think about anything else but the aerial arts. And I come from a heavy dance background. I did, ballet and, like Zumba and yoga and all of that stuff prior. I would do lots of performances as a child. That felt very natural that it was a dance space for me. And then at the end of my Boston University, I did a performance. And it was cool, partially because I had just gone through all this disability study. So these are things I had no idea about. I didn't know that disability had a history. I didn't know what any of those things were. I didn't know that a lot of, so in learning all of those things, finding out that I'm trying to be proud of who I am, but still having a really hard time with it. Then doing this aerial arts performance, I was in like the spring showcase, and it was just me on stage. And I just spent so much of my life hiding my hand and so much of my life trying to disappear and not draw attention to myself. So to be there on the middle of the stage and have the lights on me and like drawing people to watch me and watch how my body's moving was a really powerful moment for me. And it's just so fun to be able to figure out how to do it. And the cool thing with aerial arts is that it's just an apparatus, and then there's your body, and it's sort of however your body can move around this apparatus or move with this apparatus is a way that creates this beautiful dance. And it just was so empowering and so much fun. So I fell in love with it, and of course needed to continue on.
So I tried an aerial arts class with Erin Ball at the Amputee Coalition. For anybody who's interested, it was so much fun. I know that you've given talks on aerial arts and its place in rehabilitation. Would you like to elaborate on that and how it could be used as an adaptive recreation activity for somebody going through a rehab process? Maybe it will inspire some of the listeners here today to join me for an aerial arts class up here in Boston.
Yeah. Erin Ball is absolutely incredible. I found her on Instagram and I called her and was just sort of asking, how can I continue to do more training? There were some pretty significant barriers that I was facing in sort of my traditional aerial classes with my hand difference. And she just was so willing to sit down with me and talk me through everything that I ended up training with her directly. I've done a couple of performances with her. I'll drive up to where she lives. She's about a 6-hour drive from where I'm at in Philly. So pre-COVID, I was going up at least once a month to train with her. So she just is so incredible. And is just so like, yes, there's a way that you can do this. And then she developed a Flying Footless program that teaches aerial instructors on how to be able to build adaptability into their training so that they are, feel prepared and empowered to be able to take on people with a whole variety of differences and disabilities. So she goes over like disability theory and then also encourages them to like, these are some different strategies that work. So what I found was really important in the disability and aerial arts journey was that this was such a beautiful place for expression and like freedom and narrative to be able to build, like you're putting on a performance if you want to. So you can pick the song, you can pick the story that you want to tell, and really whatever that wants to be, whether it's on the disability pride journey or not. So much of the theory behind occupational therapy is engaging people in meaningful activities. So with that, like this is a fun activity that somebody is able to do. It has opportunities for mastery. So if you get a new skill, it has opportunities to develop strength in any part of the body that you want to, or encourage range of motion should people want to work on those things. And then it also has, like areas of skill builder and all of those things. And then to just have this moment of something to be proud of at the end and to work towards so that people can really unlock the ideas that they have on themselves about their bodies and can unlock the ideas that people have when they're watching somebody that is an aerial artist that has sort of a different body. Tina Carter is out of the UK. And she has this really beautiful dissertation that she wrote. She got a PhD on disability and aerial arts. And she talked about how there's the notion of disability is almost that people are subhuman. And then there's the notion that aerial artist is almost superhuman. So if you have a disabled aerialist, then they really juxtapose each other, right? Because we're having this person that is socially seen as subhuman doing this superhuman task. Like, what does that do to our perception of what it means to see somebody with a disability? So that was just, her work is so fantastic. And I really felt that. It was like, here's a way that we can really challenge what we think of people with different bodies, that yes, we are capable of doing lots of really extraordinary things, regardless of our disabilities, and that maybe we need supports in other areas, and that's not a bad thing or anything to be ashamed of, but to really see that disability is equal just as much as any able-bodied person is.
So now I'd like
this next question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. Now I'd like to transition into your latest chapter. So you just closed another chapter of a book as you attained your doctorate in occupational therapy.
Yeah.
Can you let us know what inspired you to want to become a doctor of physical therapy, and what challenges you faced as a woman with a hand difference working in the medical and rehabilitation fields? I enjoyed our conversation yesterday about 2 women working in the medical field with disabilities, and I'd love for you to elaborate.
Yeah. Where did I start? Occupational therapy, I found it when I was doing a clinical, I was volunteering at a hospital. I liked my flight attendant life, but I knew that I wanted to do something else. I was just really struggling at what that something else was. I'd explored being a teacher. I was an AmeriCorps teacher for a year, and I really liked the teaching dynamic, but I just knew that working in a school wasn't where my heart was. So I was looking for informal science education. I was volunteering at a science museum here in Philly, and then I was looking at what are other roles in the medical field aside from being a physician, because I knew that that's also not quite where my heart was at. And then the rehab department needed an extra volunteer, and there was this young woman who was just in a car accident. So she had a spinal cord injury. She's 8 years old. She's in this wheelchair, and she is trying to figure out how to navigate the kitchen in her wheelchair. And so she just saw me and was like, "What happened to you?" And her like sassy little 8-year-old self. And I was like, "Wow, I was born this way. Like, what about you?" And she's like, "Car accident." And it was just like the cutest thing. And I got to make cookies with her, and she the cookies were little, so I had a hard time holding them in my left hand to be able to frost them, and I was kind of dropping them, and she's figuring out, like, if she washes her hands, how does she then move her wheelchair without touching the wheels? And so I left that and was like, hold on, what did we just do? But I was asking my department heads, and so then I was like, that's it. It's this teaching relationship that's happening, but I'm helping encourage people do the things that they want to do, and working with them to figure out, like, what are their goals, and what are their barriers that they're facing, and how can we find ways around that? And then, of course, being able to use my lived experience of having a limb difference to help sort of facilitate that conversation. So then I was like, yes, need to go to OT school. And OT right now can go the doctorate route, or it can go the master's route. And knowing sort of who I am and the things that I like to do, I'm always involved in lots of projects, and I like running things. So I knew that in order to get into like teaching positions, or getting into any type of like program development or program evaluation or any more further research, that the doctorate route would just set me up more for those things than the master's route did. So I elected for the doctorate program, and then got into Boston University, which was incredible, and I loved it, and it was so great. And then both school and sort of on my clinical rotations, it just was interesting because there's a lot of the conversation of us versus them. So there's a lot of like, we are medical professionals and there's nothing wrong with us. And then there's the people that we're helping have disabilities, and they're them. So even some of the language on speakers that we'd have come talk to our classes was very kind of us versus them. And I really didn't like that. That didn't sit very well for me, because so much of what they were saying, I was like, but you're talking about me. Like, you're talking about me, and you're talking about my life, and you're talking about my experience. And this one woman came in to speak to our class, and she was talking about like this girl she was working with that had a weird arm. And I was like, but that's me. Like, I am the girl with the weird arm. And our program talked so much about the intentionality of the language that we're using, and to make sure that we're using really inclusive language, that I went to my, department heads and was just like, listen, speakers that we're having come in, like, really aren't using these inclusive words, and that they're talking about me, and as if that none of the medical professionals themselves, had a disability or whatever, identify with the disability community, but then they're helping these others that do. So that I was very surprised about, and kind of felt that a little bit on my clinical rotations. For the most part, people were pretty fine. I had a really great supervisor that kind of helped me explore different ways to be able to, be able to push a wheelchair and sort of manage an IV pole, or just sort of how to manage all the different lines. I was working in the ICU on my second rotation, so all of the different lines and leads that are, there to support individuals, trying to figure out how to manage them, and, the person themselves, and make sure that everybody's safe was a little challenging and tricky. And for the most part, they were pretty fine, but I was sort of taken back by that us versus them. And I think that's just the lack of people with disabilities in healthcare positions, or people with disabilities sharing that they have a disability that's working in a healthcare role. And I know that's a large theme in general, is that people with disabilities aren't in leadership conversations, in different businesses and organizations. And I think things are changing, and I think that there's been some good positive change that's happening as a result of that, but also knowing that, people with disabilities are not represented proportionally to how many people exist that have disabilities to those that are in leadership roles. Like, I know a few are getting in there now, but it's not nearly, what am I trying to say? So there's 25% of people in the US have a disability, and not 25% of our healthcare workers or our leadership identifies as having a disability. So hopefully in the years to come that changes.
Speaking of school, when you were at Shriners Hospital working on your doctorate degree, your doctoral project was to create this awesome resource for people actually parents with children of limb difference. Now, what was that like? What did you include? And is it open to the public? And if so, where can people find it?
Absolutely, yes. It is open to the public. It is at shrinerschildrens.org/hand differences. I can send that in the chat too. So it's made for everybody. It's just housed on the Shriners Hospital website because that's who my partnership was with. I went back to my home hospital. I was a Shriners patient when I was younger, and I went to the Shriners Hospital for Children of Northern California, and Dr. Michelle James was my hand surgeon and had done a few operations on me when I was under 5, and then has continued to be a fantastic mentor and great influence in me on my life, and got me connected to different projects that I've done as regarding that. So when I went to OT school, we had to do a research project as part of the doctorate component. So I was able to work under Dr. James, and we built this resource because so many parents have a child with limb difference and are just like, well, what do we do? And limb difference is on the beginning spectrum of disability, if we consider disability a spectrum, to that point where it's like, are they disabled? Are they not disabled? Like, they kind of exist in both. And there's still a lot of stigma against the word disability. So perhaps parents aren't plugging into, 504 accommodations or IEP accommodations that could actually be really beneficial for their children, because there's a lot of like, well, my kid's not disabled and they don't get to have those services kind of thing. So in order to help kind of just provide supports that this is, that research has been done on children with limb differences and their experiences and what parents are like and all of those different types of things. So we wanted to be able to house a place that was accessible for parents that really sort of synthesized what the past 20 years of research has been. So that website, it has 8 different pages on it. It goes through the child experience. So it talks about stigma. It talks about the emotional milestones. So that crisis at 8 that kids are facing. Kids also have another crisis at 16. And this has been documented in research, which is cool to know that there's research about me and my experience. So that was so cool reading all of these things. And then just to see the progression of research and as it's evolved over the years. So those things are there. There's also the parent experience tab. So many parents, it is so common and so real and so valid that parents feel guilty that their child has a hand difference. If they feel that it's something that they did or didn't do when they were pregnant. I mean, people will rack their pregnancy and they're like, oh, I ate peas at 3 weeks. That must have been it. And you're like, we don't know. There's no correlation. And grandparents too. Grandparents will feel guilty that it was something that they did that didn't set up their children well enough, and so this idea of like not good enough thing. So parents have to go through a lot of coping in order to make a resolution that they have a child with hand difference. So we sort of cover those topics. And there's a really great poem that was just shared with me recently that talked about how it's almost, like you're a parent, having a kid is similar to, buying tickets and planning this trip to Italy and like everything that you want to, you're going to eat Italian food and you're going to go look at all the gelato and you're going to go to all these cool museums and just how fancy Italy is and how you're prepared and you're excited and all your friends are going to Italy. And then the airplane lands and upon landing, the flight attendant says, welcome to Holland. Like there was a change in your itinerary, like now you're in Holland. And parents are like, wait, what? I was supposed to go to Italy. Like I'm looking at pictures of all my friends in Italy and all the things they're experiencing. And they're just not prepared to be in Holland. And this poem was written when Holland was still Holland. I suppose it's the Netherlands now. And so it talks about like that there's nothing wrong with Holland. And Holland has lots of really beautiful things to offer. But there is that moment of needing to transition and become acquainted to all of the beautiful things that Holland can experience while a parent was preparing to go to Italy. So I really liked that sort of that imagery, because that's exactly like what raising a child with a hand difference is, or any type of disability or differences, is that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different journey, and there's lots of really beautiful things that come with it. So that's sort of what we tried to communicate through the website. There's also school resources is there. So it talks about 504 and IEPs and different things to talk with your teacher. If it's, a lot of parents will have concerns about the first day of school and entering kindergarten. So, what do we say to the teacher? What does the teacher say to, what does my child say to other kids? That's a space where a parent is not able to control the conversation that kids are having about hands. So I know parents feel pretty anxious about that. So it just gives some good resources on different strategies to practice at home to help make sure that, parents and their children both feel as prepared as they can when they enter the classroom. So it's fun. It was a fun time. And there's also tons of pictures of kids with all sorts of hand differences that are having so much fun, which was just an important thing to help parents develop a bright and positive future for their child.
Thank you so much for doing that, because that's something that everybody needs in this community.
Yeah.
I feel like there's not enough resources. And what an amazing resource you help provide for that next parent with a child that's born with hand difference. So where do you see yourself using your occupational therapy degree in your next chapter going forward?
That's such a great question, because I had this really beautiful trajectory, and then COVID happened, and then I'm like rewriting and pivoting, as I'm sure many of us are. So we'll see what that looks like. I mean, right now I'm still trying. I've applied to all 7 jobs that I'm qualified for in Philadelphia as being an occupational therapist. So we will see how that goes. But much of my work that I want to do is in supporting parents and children with any type of physical difference, right? That's a lot of where the work that I am and have been doing is. So to be able to continue to share my story at, different conferences and in the medical community, right? And being able to help our healthcare providers see that people are people and that disability is this really fun, beautiful thing, is a lot of the space that I want to be in. And then continuing my aerial journey. Right before COVID had started, I was working with Aaron Ball and starting to get like my first paid gigs in performing with the aerial arts. And so I'd love to continue that work. I also just started a YouTube channel called Sarah Living Life. We have our next episode drops on Thursday, which is fun. So again, that's all just kind of work that is sharing what the true narrative of disability is, finding pride in our bodies and the differences they have, and willing to help rewrite that stigma or really challenge that stigma that has on disability. So as far as what that looks like for paid spaces, we're still working on that, but progressing the podcast forward and really using all of the disability theory and all of the disability research and that idea of connecting people to the things that they find meaningful is all therapy or occupational therapy lens and perspective. So whether I'm working as an actual like reimbursable occupational therapist in a hospital, or whether I continue work in this sort of alternative occupational therapy space where maybe I'm not getting like reimbursed by insurance companies or we're able to say that this is like a therapeutic space, that regardless at that point, it doesn't matter as much as the work just trying to help encourage people to be proud of themselves, to help, walk parents back from the cliff, and that things are going to be okay.
I love it. I think the biggest impact an occupational therapist had for me personally was as an adaptive yoga instructor.
Yeah.
So I really love being able to use that therapeutic medical background to really enhance somebody getting back into something that they love and enjoy.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Sarah is a finalist in the Maximum Cover Girl Challenge. So Sarah, when you win, how is that going to change your life personally? And how do you think the modeling industry will look at inclusion? How do you think that'll change?
Such a great question. Just, and it goes back to Evie, right? To just be like, Evie, there are people like you that are in mainstream medias, and just to be able to see yourself in mainstream media, whether that's like physically seeing yourself or seeing somebody that is like you or in some part of your narrative, is so powerful. So that's really what I'm so excited about. So to really help just be another person that can break into that mainstream space, and so that people can be exposed to what a limb difference is. That way, when they see somebody on a street, it's not a surprise. They're not calling them deformed. They're not interrogating them on everything that happened and what did their mother eat at 3 weeks in development that caused this to happen, right? So how can we help just get rid of all of those conversations? And part of that is to help get involved in these mainstream spaces. So that's what I'm most excited about. And we're really at this wonderful point where I feel like our society is beginning to listen and really wants to hear the authentic stories, and are really looking and seeking to have people with different experiences be in the main spotlight like that. So if somebody seeing me on the cover of Maxim then encourages them to want to pursue similar type of work, then like, yes, that's all I want. So that's what I'm really excited about. So hopefully that turns into being able to continue all of my projects that I'm doing right now, but get paid for them, right? So like I would love to get paid to model professionally. I would love to get paid to speak professionally. And these are all things that I'm working on now in the developmental phases, so that hopefully they can turn into that being my sort of main source of income, so I can continue to do all of this work, which is really great. And then the Maxim challenge itself, the grand prize winner gets $25,000. So that would be really, I mean, to be on the cover of Maxim would be incredible. To have a different body on the cover of Maxim be so incredible. And then of course the money bonus would be able to, with that I would be able to buy all of the equipment to be able to have my own aerial arts rig. So, I mean, that's kind of a hard thing right now is studios are all closed, so I'm not able to practice on the actual apparatus. My last time I was on one was in March. But rigs and mats and the apparatus themselves are all pretty pricey. So that money would be able to help me get my own set of equipment so that I can train and start doing shows. And then I've been working with Erin on getting trained on being an adaptive aerial coach, so that I could be able to help teach, continue to teach the adaptive aerial arts world, and then be able to provide scholarships for people to go to Amputee, which is, if anyone is interested, next year, hopefully it's happening, COVID's not a thing anymore, that Erin Ball teaches this week-long amazing amputee circus camp. So anybody to any skill that wants to go, they can. So money would go to help sponsor people there if they're not able to sort of cover travel and enrollment costs and things like that. So that would be amazing. Oh.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So here at the Adaptive Collaborative, we like to embody gratitude, grit, and grace. They've played a huge role in my personal life, and I'm just curious to see if they've played a role in yours and how.
Absolutely. I mean, gratitude is so powerful. When I was first beginning to share my story, I was very scared at what people would say when I first started to vocalize things of my experience, right? A lot of the things that people told me growing up, I never shared with anybody else. So to be an adult and feel empowered that I knew that there was important to my story, but being so terrified of being able to share it, I am just so thankful for just the people who have supported me, that were just like, no, this is important for you to say. And I'm just so appreciative of people, just like commenting on Facebook, right? I know that sounds kind of silly, but just knowing that there's people that support this work and that story is just so thankful. And all of my mentors and all of my friends who have helped build me to be the person that I am today, knowing I didn't get here by myself. It's all of the work that everybody has done with me. And I'm just so grateful for that. And grit is very real. The world can be pretty gnarly sometimes, and I like to think that people don't say things out of mean intent, but there's a lot of pretty nasty things that have been said, and so being able to find like hope and beauty in the world through that, right? So that I think grit is just huge to be able to get through those tough times and to find better ways to navigate the world and better ways to help educate those around us so that mean things aren't being said or mean interactions aren't being set up. And grace, I just think, is so powerful in being able to help, I think, just educate all of us on what the experience is in this sort of like kind and loving way is what my personal feel is on things. You know, I really like to help. I like to think that people are just sort of sharing the stigmas that they've been taught, and it's not them being mean, but sort of how can we really kindly re-navigate this or think about other ways to be able to interact with each other. I think is just really powerful to be able to do that in a kind way. I think help facilitates more understanding versus a very mean or angry response back. I don't know, but I mean, that seems to work in my life. But when I hear those words, those are things that I think of.
In preparing for tonight, I listened to a couple different interviews that you did, read a couple different articles, and you said that you, growing up, you struggled with social anxiety and you would hide your hand. Now, let's say there's somebody out there that's watching this tonight or going back and listening to it later. What advice would you give them, specifically children, if they're dealing with something similar?
I would just, this is you. This is all of who you are, and it is so important to be proud of all the things that you are, and that there's people that are like you, and there's the people that are here to support you, and there's people that love you, and to remember that and to work through that and to be really proud of who you are. This is a piece of you, and just that it's such an important and beautiful aspect of your experience that is so worthy of being here, and your story and the things that you've learned and having this type of difference is so valued, and we really need that in the world. So share your story.
So to piggyback on that, what advice do you have for their parents?
Their parents, yes. That there is absolutely nothing wrong, that this isn't anything that anyone did or didn't do, and that everything is going to be okay, that your kid is going to be a wonderful, amazing, complicated, messy kid, just like all of the kids are, and that part of it doesn't change, that this is a piece that's a little different that you'll kind of try to navigate and figure out, but that's all totally doable. I also think it's really important to really like look at what supports do you have and to make sure that, and that this is scary. This can be scary, and that is so real, and give yourself permission to feel that. But also look at what supports do you have and what types of coping mechanisms do exist, because the way that parents cope with their child having a hand difference will be like their children will model those same behaviors. So if you practice behaviors that are really helpful, then kids will also model those same behaviors. So that's also just really important too.
Sarah, so you do this podcast, Disarming Disability. I listened to it a few times. I love it. I think it's great. But can you tell everybody out there what the mission is and what you guys hope to accomplish with it?
Absolutely. So Disarming Disability is a podcast that Nicole Kelly and I both co-host. We both have congenital limb differences. Nicole Kelly was a Miss America contestant back in 2014. And both of us, as I was going through my occupational therapy program and as she was going through the aftermath of her contestant year, we're just like, why did we not know disability history when we were growing up? Like, why is that missing from all of our textbooks? And we just really wanted to, and we came into our disability pride in adulthood, that we really wanted to help others reach the same sense of pride too, and hopefully reach it earlier so they didn't need to go through all that to get it into their adulthood. So we are interviewing different researchers and different leaders within the disability world that can sort of speak on like collective disability experiences and sort of what are the challenges that current leaders are facing in the disability movement, and what is research been saying about different types of topics. So we bring in experts, we deep dive in, we have 3 experts on a particular topic. This season we have a section on getting active where we talk just to different leaders that are working with different corporations to help, expand what disability means as far as their employees go. We have another section that really deep dives in the medical model. So what is current healthcare doing right now to help understand the disability experience? And then this chapter will end with sexuality. So what does the intersection of sort of like disability and sexuality and, what does that look like, which is really cool. So we're excited. And we are hoping to turn this into just progressing all of these conversations. Like we would love to be able to turn our podcast into different workshops so that we can kind of help fill that space of the gaps of disability history and disability theory that is really lacking in different school settings. Pre-COVID, we were invited to go to the University of Northern Iowa and give a workshop like a full day workshop to students who wanted to start like disability studies clubs and be able to do disability advocacy on campus. So that's kind of how we want to help empower others to really take on learning their history and wanting to create real change, to create a more inclusive society.
Love
Absolutely amazing. Sarah, we can't thank you enough. Tonight has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Do you mind putting in the chat your contact information so people know how to contact you? And if you could also tell us, for when this gets turned into audio, how people can connect with you.
Great. Yes. So I am Sarah Tuberty. It is tub like a bathtub and then ERTY. They're all right next to each other on the keyboard. So you can email me at sarahtuberty@gmail.com. And I have Sarah with an H, so SARAH. I also have a website that is sarahtuberty.com. So that has a collection of all of the projects that I've been doing are sort of there. And then the podcast is called Disarming Disability. And you can find that on anywhere you listen to podcasts. So it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Google Play. We also have a website, disarmingdisability.com, that you can find. And also, twice a week, we feature different advocates who are doing work. Either they want to share their story or they have a new project that they want to share and promote. Like, we just want to create space for people to take on their own stories and be able to share their own stories and the words that they want to use. So if you or if anyone that you know would be interested in being a part of the our disability advocate profile, send us an email at disarmingdisability@gmail.com, or there's the form through our website. I'll put these links up here in the chat too, and that we always are looking for people, and we want to hear stories just to be like, look at these really cool people who are doing so much fun stuff in the world.
Sarah, thank you so much again for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know Melissa does as well. Thank you guys for listening. Tune in next week as we have another awesome guest, Robert Rodriguez, the founder of Limb Possible. So that's definitely an episode that you don't want to miss. Sarah, again, thank you so much. Go check out the podcast, the websites, connect with her because she's great.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for spending so much of your evening with me. I'm excited for the world that we're all going to create together, guys.
This is exciting. And if you haven't checked it out, check out Disarming Disability. It's truly amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Great.
Thank you. Take care, guys.